Super petrol, so it should be retailing at about 212 shillings, down from 217 as at yesterday. So yes, go fill up your tanks ahead of Christmas. My name is Fred Indemule. 10 days to Christmas officially. And yes, it's a bit rainy this morning in Nairobi. Highs of 23 degrees Celsius and 17 degrees lows with light rain, chances of light rain across the day. So get your brollies and your umbrellas out. That is what you're talking about. Later on, we'll be discussing a State of the Nation with a number of women panelists. Do stand by for that conversation on State of the Nation. Later on, we'll be looking at a special kids festival. And Maureen Waititu, the one and only, will be in studio to tell us more about that. So something to look forward to. But for now, let's take a look at the top stories. Former Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich was yesterday acquitted alongside his co-accused in the 63 billion shilling Aurora and Kimoret Dam project scandal. This is after trial magistrate Eunice Nyutu said there is no evidence to warrant them being placed on their defense. And as Grace Kuria-Kanja tells us, elsewhere in the corridors of justice, a police officer who shot and killed a 33-year-old man in Nyeri County has been sentenced to 7 years in jail, even as Naftali Kinothia, who was charged with the murder of Ivy Wangeshi, was sentenced to 40 years in prison.
Henry Rotich, former Treasury CS, is now a free man. In a Thursday ruling, Magistrate Eunice Nyutu said the prosecution had failed to lead the case, further stating that there was no evidence tabled in court to show that the former CS and 8 others failed to follow procurement laws in the 63 billion shillings Aurora and Kimorer Dams case.
I think the legal obligation, I believe, will mean permanent version.
Rotich had on November 20th asked an anti-corruption court to acquit him, saying no money was lost in the financing and development of the Aurora and Kimorer Dams project.
I hereby order that this ruling shall be placed before the Attorney General and the National Council of Administrative Justice with a view of sparking conversation on legal reforms on this issue. In the meantime, all the accused persons herein are hereby acquitted under Section 210.
A visibly infuriated Magistrate Eunice Nyutu calling out the ODPP for what she termed as a waste of precious judicial time. In Nyeri County, a police officer who shot and killed a 33-year-old man in his home in Mokorene, Nyeri County, after a confrontation at a bar 8 years ago, has been sentenced to 7 years in jail. This is after the court found the officer, Chibungu Sanga, guilty of manslaughter earlier this month.
Hatukuridhika. Tulikuwa tunatarajia afungwe maisha kwa ile kitendo alikuwa amefanya.
We also had issues in understanding the judge's contention that he did not see an issue of premeditated murder, and the facts seem to contradict his findings. But those are things that we will look at and we'll know whether we are going to appeal or not.
And to Eldoret now, Naftali Njami Kinothia, who was charged with the murder of Moi University medical student Ivy Wangeshi on April 9, 2019, has been declared guilty and sentenced to 40 years in prison by Justice Stephen Githinji in Eldoret.
The offense carries on the upper side a death sentence. However, given the decision in the case of Francis Karioko Murwatetu by the Supreme Court, the death sentence is not a mandatory sentence.
The court, supported by testimonies from 17 prosecution witnesses and presented evidence, established that the accused had purchased a new metallic axe and travelled from Nairobi to Eldoret, where he brutally attacked and killed the victim in broad daylight outside Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital.
The convict and the victim were friends for a long time. The convict was out for a love relationship. When the urge was turned down, he was irritated and committed the offense of murder in a brutal, awful manner.
Grace Kuria-Kanja, TV 47.
Now, President William Ruto has expressed a strong disapproval towards those responsible for the legal intervention, which saw the High Court suspend the planned implementation of the Social Health Insurance Act of 2023 by the Ministry of Health until February next year. The president says his government will not relent on the Social Health Insurance Fund and will take on cartels in the health ministry head-on. Chichi Josephine tells us more.
Speaking during the annual Kimalel Goat auction on Thursday in Kimalel, Baringo South, the head of state characterized the individuals as corrupt and accused them of engaging in a pattern of extorting money from the National Health Insurance Fund.
Imagine kuna mtu ako na hospitali kwa fulani hapo. Ati anafanya upasuaji operation. Na ni wizi tu anaiba pesa ya serikali. Na ndio wameenda kotini kuzuia kwa sababu tumesema katika hii sheria mpya tuko na digital health bill ambayo itahakikisha ya kwamba kila delivery ya health service tutajua kwa mtandao.
However, President Ruto's critics suggest frustration with the perceived hindrance to the government's healthcare initiatives and raises questions about the motives behind the legal challenge.
Unajua watu wengi kwa sababu wamekuwa wafanyabiashara matapeli katika sekta ya health, wamekuwa matajiri wa kupindukia kwa sababu ya corruption katika mambo ya health, ufisadi. Sasa wameenda kotini kuzuia. Na unasikia hiyo kelele yote, hawasemi ati bei ya bima ya afya imerudi chini. Hapana, hawasemi hapo.
At the same time, the president addressed the pressing issue of insecurity in the region, emphasizing his commitment to tackling the menace as he assured residents that his government would eradicate the challenge of insecurity.
Hapa North Rift tuko na askari wa jeshi 1,500. Hapa North Rift tuko na askari wa polisi wengine 3,000. Mimi nataka niwahakikishie hawa askari hawawezi kutoka hapa mpaka wakora wote na wezi wa mifugo wote tumalizane na wao.
Barabara ya Loruk kwenda Kapedo ya Excellency na kutokea Lokichar itabadilisha pia Kerio Valley ya Excellency kuhakikisha tumepambana na majangili na kuhakikisha ichemu hiyo imebadilika.
During his address, the president highlighted the ongoing efforts in the education sector, particularly the reconstruction of vandalized schools. Currently, 21 schools are under construction in both Baringo South and Baringo North by the Kenya Defence Forces.
Tayari tuliweka pesa karibu milioni 100 ya kujenga mashule yenu. Mashule yote ambayo yalifungwa hapa, nimesema hizo mashule lazima sifunguliwe. Tutaifanyia ukarabati, zile zimeharibika tutajenga upya.
The annual Kimalel Goat auction was the brainchild of former President Daniel Arap Moi, who aimed to address the challenges faced by pastoralist communities in the region. The event provides a reliable market for their goats, ensuring a fair and stable prices. In today's auction, a total of 3,000 goats were sold each. President William Ruto and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua buying 1,000 goats at 15,000 shillings each, and the rest were sold at 13,000 shillings each. The total money spent was 41 million shillings. Chichi Josephine, TV 47.
Now, the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, EPRA, yesterday announced new fuel prices that took effect from midnight. Super petrol, diesel and kerosene will now retail at 212 shillings 36 cents, 201 shillings 47 cents and 199 shillings 5 cents respectively, after a reduction of 5, 2 and 4 shillings and 1 cent respectively per litre. Last month, the prices of diesel and kerosene were reduced by 2 shillings a litre, with diesel maintaining its price.
The Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, EPRA, has announced the new reduced prices of super petrol, diesel and kerosene. In the new review that comes as a relief to many Kenyans who are already struggling under the yoke of the skyrocketing cost of living, Super Petrol will now retail at 212 shillings after a reduction of 5 shillings per litre, as diesel retails at 201 shillings after a reduction of 2 shillings, while kerosene will now be at 199 shillings per litre after being reduced by 4 shillings in Nairobi. The drop comes after the average cost of imported Super Petrol decreased by 16.11% from $827 per cubic meter in October 2023 to $694 per cubic meter last month. In November, the price of Super Petrol remained at a constant 217 shillings as diesel and kerosene reduced by 2 shillings per litre. The new prices come in the wake of a hint by government spokesperson Isaac Mwaura on reduced fuel prices in order to caution Kenyans from the hard economic times.
I know there has always been the issues about the cost of living. Of course, you'll agree with me that significantly this is coming down. Just even maybe as we proceed here, there will be an announcement of the reduction of fuel prices. Going forward, it is a position of government that you will see a significant drop in plus prices internationally, and therefore that will actually translate into better prices here in Kenya.
Vera Alberta, TV47, Nairobi.
And those are the top stories this morning as prepared for you by the TV47 News Desk. Let's now take a look at today's news diary. And yes, we kick off with the 70th graduation ceremony for the University of Nairobi. About 5,000 graduates will today be conferred with various degree and diploma certificates at the 70th graduation ceremony of the University of Nairobi. The event will be held at the Chancellor's Court opposite the Central Catering Unit, famously known as CCU, and is scheduled to start at 7 a.m. this morning. Now, among the 5,000 graduates this morning at the 70th graduation ceremony is our very own Flora Limuki. And congratulations to Flora as she graduates today. We are very proud of you, Limuki. All the best. Yes, she's definitely besides herself as she awaits to be conferred with that degree in broadcast journalism. Congratulations once again to Flora Limuki as she graduates from the University of Nairobi this morning. We continue with our diary and something else happening today. Kenyatta University will hold its 54th graduation ceremony this morning, where thousands of graduates will as well be conferred with degree and diploma certificates. The event will be held at the Graduation Square at the university's main campus along Thika Road, and this is expected to start at 8:30 a.m. today. And because of those two graduation ceremonies from the top two universities in Kenya, the University of Nairobi and Kenyatta University, do expect a lot of traffic, especially on city roads throughout today. The other big thing happening today, the visit to Kenya by a delegation from Haiti, led by the Caribbean country's Police Director General, comes to an end today. The DG, Franz Elbe, and his team landed in Nairobi on Tuesday for a 3-day tour to understand how the Kenyan police operate ahead of that much-anticipated deployment to Haiti. The team met Inspector General of the Kenya National Police Service, Japheth Koome, and held bilateral security discussions. For city residents, keep in mind a 24-hour water supply disruption to sections of the city kicks off this morning. The disruption has been occasioned by an emergency shutdown of the Sasumua-Kabete pipeline to facilitate repairs of major leaks along the pipeline. Now, areas to be affected are those along Waiyaki Way, James Gishuru Road, Dennis Preet Road, Ngong Road, Langata Road, Peponi Road, Kikuyu Road, Naivasha Road, and Mbagathi, as well as Riverside Drive. So do expect some dry taps for the next 24 hours. And that's our diary this morning, our news diary. Let's now take a look at today in history. And today in history, on December 5th, 2009, Boeing conducted the 787-8 maiden flight from Payne Field in Everett, Washington, and landed 3 hours later at Seattle's Boeing Field. During the flight, the 787 reached a top speed of approximately 333 kilometers per hour and a maximum altitude of 13,200 feet. We start off with, let's start off with the Standard. The big headline on the Standard this morning, Freedom for Rotich exposes state agencies. As a big headline on the Standard today. End of a circus after a 4-year trial that saw 49 witnesses lined up to testify, with the prosecution having no questions for the majority of them. Former Treasury CS Henry Rotich and 8 others are cleared in the 65 billion shilling Kimorer and Aror Dams scandal. Who dropped the ball? Story and pictures on page 2 of the Standard. The other big story on the front page of the Standard, Ruto is after me over 15 billion shilling whistleblowing. That's according to Controller of Budget, Margaret Nyakango. And that's a claim. That's the other big headline on the front page of the Standard. On the bottom there of the front page of the Standard, Ivy killer gets 40 years in jail. It's also part of our top stories. More highlights on the top strip of the Standard. To the top strip now of the Standard, a slight reprieve as cost of petrol down by 5 shillings. Yes, something to smile about, albeit for now. In business news, high taxes, debt to hit economy. And finally, in sports, champions Arsenal City fight for glory. That's the Standard today. Let's take a look at the Daily Nation. The Daily Nation this Friday leads with Treasury putting caps on office lunch tea. Austerity measures, officials advised to use public transport and hold meetings in their boardrooms. The National Treasury has announced a new round of austerity measures for ministries, departments and agencies, chopping allowances for official travel by half, and limiting the category of officers allowed to use planes on domestic routes. It also banned non-essential lunch, tea and water for civil servants and slashed imposts by 50%. That's a big headline on the front page of the Daily Nation. The other story given prominence, man who hacked university girl to death, jailed for 40 years. And we do have the photo of the convict, Naftali Kinothia, and his victim, Ivy Wangeshi, there on the front page. The other big highlights on the front page, how DPP let Rotich 8 others off the hook in Dam's case. This is one of the, I think, the common stories across most dailies today. The fact that the former CS for Treasury has acquitted alongside others. The other highlights, fuel prices dropped by the biggest margin since October 2021, still on the front page of the Daily Nation. And Man City go for full house of trophies at Club World Cup. And that's the front page of the Daily Nation today. Matters Health back to the drawing board as HIV vaccine trial stopped, also featuring on the front page. Tuangazie gazeti la Taifa Leo sasa. Maskini Rigiji, habari kuu pale. Duru zasema mgawanyiko umetokana na vita vya ubabe kati yake na Nyoro. Masuala ya siasa, ushawishi wa naibu wa rais Rigathi Gachagua katika eneo la Mlima Kenya unaonekana kuyeyuka, huku mng'ang'anio wa hadhi ya msemaji wa kisiasa wa eneo hilo ukiendelea kushika kasi. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili. Nasema pale maskini Rigiji. Vidokezo vingine, Henry Rotich huru katika kashfa ya bilioni 63. Kwingineko Mwangaza akwaruzana tena na MCAs. akaidi bunge la kaunti na kuzindua miradi ya hazina ya mitambo na uchukuzi. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa 5. Habari zaidi, familia yaandalia binti birthday siku ya mazishi yake. Marehemu alikuwa amepanga kwa kina jinsi angesherehekea siku yake ya kuzaliwa kabla ya kufariki kutokana na tatizo la figo. Habari yenyewe kwenye ukurasa wa 4. Pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, aliyeua mpenzi aliyemkataa ni jela miaka 40. Na kwenye spoti, Arsenal City waibeba Uingereza. Macho yako kwa Arsenal Man City kwenye draw ya 16 bora UEFA. Masuala ya spoti kwenye ukurasa wa 20 wa Taifa Leo. Tukisalia humu nchini, tuangazie gazeti la The Star. The Star, a different headline: exposed trouble with Kenya Power. Auditors report shows managers paid some ghost suppliers more than 488 million shillings. The story is extensively covered on pages 4 and 5 of The Star. Some more news on the same. Some applicants have been kept waiting for up to 11 years to be connected to electricity. The other story given prominence, interesting photos there of the evolution of the police uniform. Police roll out new uniforms with name, force number on display. And we have the uniforms from before 2018, the changes made in 2018, and now 5 years later, the new look of the National Police Service. Interesting. What do you think of this police uniform? The latest police uniform with the name, force number on display. You can share with us on our social media handles at TV47 News on X and TV47 Kenya on Facebook. Let's move to the bottom strip of The Star and take a look at more highlights. Rotich acquitted as reckless prosecutor censured by court. In politics, Raila suffers major blow as ODM rebels triumph in court. And yes, in the corridors of justice, Kinuthia gets 40-year jail term for Wangeshi murder. And that's the front page of The Star this morning. Let's take a look at the People Daily. On the People Daily matters Kimorer, why Kimorer case was thrown out. And this, I think, is the biggest discussion point across all local dailies this morning. Court heats out a DPP prosecution team on the spot after deliberately failing to provide evidence in 63 billion shilling graft case against former Treasury CS Rotich and 8 others. That story is on page 4. And on the bottom there, a photo of that ceremony yesterday in honor of fallen heroes and heroines in the police force. And the story is about 37 police officers who died in the line of duty over last year. Matters Fuel featuring on the top strip of the People Daily. Fuel price ease ahead of festivities. And yes, another one of those common stories across all front pages today. 40 years in jail for man who killed lover with axe. That story is on page 6. That is as far as our local dailies are concerned, but you still have one more, Business Daily. Why Kibaki was Kenya's best chief executive, and this is according to the World Bank. GDP per capita grew the fastest in the Kibaki era. Poverty rate declined from 46.7% to 36.1% in 10 years. Now, this is a new World Bank report that has pointed to why the late President Mwai Kibaki was Kenya's best chief executive, yet, after his economic policies did the most to cut poverty rates in the period between 2005 and 2013. Other highlights on the ticker: Treasury caps travel packs, air travel lunch in austerity. Peter Njonjo steps down as Twiga CEO after funding round. And Jumia to close down food delivery. Of course, the other highlight about EPRA cutting fuel prices by biggest margin in 2 years also features there on the front page. And I think it's the other story given prominence by the Business Daily this morning. Tukivuka boda sasa, tuelekee kwenye nchi jirani. Let's start off with Uganda. And in Uganda, we take a look at the Daily Monitor. The big story on the front page of the Daily Monitor this morning: ministers' cars to be withdrawn Monday As the country gears up for the non-aligned movement and G77 plus China summit due next month, the government plans to withdraw vehicles from its officials, including ministers and permanent secretaries, starting next week to take care of visiting officials. Wow. I guess ministers in Uganda will now be using boda so that their official vehicles can carry the visitors. These are big news in Kampala this morning, as featured on the front page of the Daily Monitor. The highlights: transport fares start rising. These are Christmas blues. Buses and travelers at the old Kampala terminal yesterday afternoon, with many transporters having started to raise fares for up-country routes, with just 10 days left to Christmas Day. We do expect something similar in Kenya as well. The other highlights on the front page of the Daily Monitor: Museveni letter on mosque sparks debate. Elsewhere, government to build palace by hotel for Ruwenzururu. And more highlights down there on the scroll. Molly Katanga's lawyer protest, raid on hospital. Elsewhere, hawkers eating our Christmas lunch, say traders. That is as far as Uganda news is concerned. We cross over to Tanzania. The big story on The Citizen: IMF proposes 3 steps to address forex wars. The International Monetary Fund Executive Board has suggested exchange rate flexibility, fiscal consolidation, and continued tightening of local currency liquidity to address pressures in Tanzania's foreign exchange market. Similar pressures being felt in Kenya as well. The other big headline on the front page of The Citizen: Tanzanians in DR Congo will be safe during poll. The other story given prominence: study sees a rebound of East African economies in 2024. Global consultancy firm Deloitte has forecast average economic growth of 6.3% in East Africa next year, nearly double the projected continental growth rate. And that story is on page 2 of The Citizen. On the top strip of The Citizen: court blocks expulsion of 19 Chadema MPs, matters politics there. Tuangazie gazeti la Mwananchi, tukisalia kule Bongo. Habari kuu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: kazi kwanza upya. Mahakama Kuu yafuta uamuzi wa Baraza Kuu la Chadema kuridhia hatua ya kamati kuu kuwavua wanachama wa bunge 19 wa viti maalum. Yasema wajumbe waliotimuliwa waliowatimua hawakustahili kushiriki uamuzi wa rufaa. Chadema yatoa msimamo. Matters politics there. Masuala ya siasa. Habari zingine zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: ngozi za ng'ombe na nguruwe kutumika matibabu ya moyo kule Tanzania. Vidokezo zaidi: teua tengua za Samia za wafikia 400, watu 414. Kwingineko, Mtanzania mwingine auawa kule Israel. Pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: hakimu asema mshtakiwa aliniambia ndiye alifyatua risasi. Masuala ya simulizi mahakamani. Na kwenye jarida la afya: unachokula ndio hubeba hatima ya figo yako, Janabi asema. Hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kule Tanzania, kama zilivyoratibiwa kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa jarida la Mwananchi. And yes, that wraps it up for our news review this morning. Do stand by for a very interesting interview with Mandy Fisher, a recording artist and social influencer from the United Kingdom, later on this episode of Morning Cafe. Bansi Kimuyu will be conducting that interview. So something interesting, especially as we prepare for the holiday. Also, we'll be telling you more about the Elf World Kids Festival later on. It's happening this weekend. But meanwhile, just after the break, we'll be having the State of the Nation. Today, we'll be having the women's perspective. We do expect Kathy Rungu, a political leader, Nrima Wako, CEO, Siasa Place, and Wanja Maina, National Chairperson, Jubilee Party, PWD's League, in studio for this. Do stand by. And of course, you can be part of that conversation through our social media on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. You're watching Morning Cafe. Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. We now want to take a look at the state of the nation. This morning we're privileged to have in studio Wanja Maina, National Chairperson, Jubilee Party, PWD's League. Wanja is a familiar face on this panel. Karibu sana, good to see you.
Asante sana, Fred. Good morning to you and good morning to our viewers.
Yes, and next to Wanja we have Nerima Wako, CEO, Siasa Place. Karibu TV47 and to Morning Cafe as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's my first time in this location.
Karibu sana. And last but definitely not least, Kathy Rungu, political leader. Karibu sana also to Morning Cafe.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and a lot has happened this past week. Of course, it started off with the Jamhuri Day celebrations and that speech by the president where he talked about Kenya being in a much better position and as far as the debt crisis is concerned. Before that, the CS for Treasury talked about Kenya being broke. And after the president's speech, he was forced to eat humble pie and swallow his words and change and say he was quoted out of context. I would want us to look at that, bearing in mind the kind of headlines this morning that we see, especially on the Daily Nation, on matters austerity. And the headline on the Daily Nation today reads, Treasury puts caps on office lunch tea. This is part of austerity measures. They're talking about cutting transport provision for official duty capped at 5,000 shillings from 10,000 previously. Use of local flights limited to only some officers. Meetings at task forces activities to be held in boardrooms. And of course, tea, mandazi is mentioned in that as well. And we've heard this story before about austerity measures. And the question is, are we doing enough? Because they always go for the low-lying fruits, get rid of the flowers, teas and mandazis. For a nation said to be in dire straits economically, do you think, and let's start with you, Wanja. Do you think the government is doing enough, even in as far as perception is concerned, in terms of austerity?
Fred, really for me, when I look at austerity measures being reduced to tea, as you've put it, tea, mandazi, local flight from Sijui transport from 5K to 10K, for me, I'm thinking about the fanfare that comes about with international travel, how conferences like they just concluded COP28, we would see lists upon lists of over 180,000 officers going to the conference. In fact, I even saw some protocol officers traveling to Dubai, and you wonder, are they the host, are they the ushers of the conference in Dubai, for example? Just as you put it, the austerity measures are always focusing on the low-hanging kind of budgets, the mandazis and the teas, but no one is talking about budgeted graft. We've seen cases where big, mega government projects are actually budgeted, but they are overly overpriced, if I were to use those words. Mm-hmm. So for me, I see this as just mere lip service. I see this, it's just as confusing, because at one point the president is saying that we are out of the woods, the CS, as you've seen, and you know, they have been talking about that their welfare is a one government approach. They are working together. But the moment the president and the CS Treasury are saying different things, then it just means that, you know, someone is lying. When I saw the Jamhuri Day celebration, needless to say that it was poorly attended. We didn't have our international friends. The memes were going around that our neighbors are laughing at us. Ati nchi haina unga, wako kwa giza, wanaongea kizungu kwa giza. Because we have also, the last 1 week, we have also experienced a national blackout. One would wonder if we are in some countries in West Africa, whom I won't mention. Mm-hmm. So it has been a week of turmoil for many. And for some people would say we celebrated 60 years of poverty because the huge inequalities are still there. In fact, yesterday, Transparency International, they did a report where they say that the income inequality in Kenya is at 40%. So we are talking about a country that is celebrating its 60th birthday, and austerity means cutting tea and mandazi, but no one is talking about lifting people from down to up. Mm-hmm. So it has been such a sad moment. But Fred, even though you've not asked me, I've seen in that same newspaper you've read for us, there's a story of the young man who has been jailed for 40 years. the one who committed a crime. You know, we are just coming out of the 16 days of activism. So I just wish to say that justice has really finally come for that family. I wish to pass my apology to the mom of the girl who was murdered, and I hope that it won't happen again to another young woman here.
Okay. Fair enough. That story also features across all the front pages of the dailies this morning. The fact that Naftali Kinothia has been sentenced to 40 years in prison for the murder of Ivy Wangeshi. But back to our discussion, Nerima. If we talk about austerity and if we may compare ourselves to other countries, recently we saw the president of Malawi, Lazarus Chakwera, ban foreign travel, not just for his ministers, but for himself as well. He said, moving forward, we will not travel just to try and help the country's ailing economy. Probably that's a kind of a shift that Kenyans would expect. Do you feel that the kind of measures taken so far in Kenya measure up?
I don't think that they measure up. I believe that it's something that the public has been demanding for a while, especially since the downturn of the economy. I do believe that the administration is feeling the pressure, so they are beginning now. People might argue that it's a bit too late, but I would rather now than never. At least there's some actions being taken. And also, you know, you have to think how large government is. And so even when we're talking about snacks, lunch, food, it's a lot when we're talking about the size of government. And also, I agree with Wanja in terms of the international travel. And I'm glad that African country has taken such a drastic measure to cut on travel completely, because we do have an administration that is focusing on digitization, and a lot of these meetings we have seen, they can happen without physical presence, and countries and worlds are able to move on without necessarily meeting physically. So we can practice what we preach, is what I would like to emphasize on. But additionally, this has happened on our continent before. President Thomas Sankara, he was very, very strict on travel. In fact, he was one of the first African presidents to drive himself and use an economic car to be able to do that. And also emphasizing that his ministers to do the same. Perhaps if we saw a more drastic turn like that, because a lot of the expenditure is also on the fuel in terms of when they travel. Even within domestic travel, it's the number of people that they travel with, it's the kind of cars that they travel with, mainly guzzlers. So if we're going to talk about the reduction of costs, a lot still needs to be done. Because when you look at the average citizen, they are cutting down costs even in their own homes. And even when we talk about the turnout, a lot of people were working on Jamhuri Day. I know a lot of people who had opened their shops and they were still working, which is quite unique for Kenya. We really love to respect our holidays, and we've had a lot of holidays, but people now are beginning to feel the pinch of, you know, utilizing the day to sit at home. They rather be working on their businesses. So you can see the attitude has changed toward the president. And so going forward, we hope to see more. We hope that this will not be the only highlight. Hopefully we'll see more stories of how they are cutting down costs in other areas, but still more needs to be done.
But Kathy, does it inspire confidence in you that government is taking this issue seriously? Because earlier this year, the head of public service, no, the chief of staff of the president had already made given a directive to government officers to reduce their travel, or to reduce the number of people in their entourage as they travel. Now to see later in the year another directive directing similar issues. Do you feel confident about how consequential this latest directive will be?
No, I think to me and to most Kenyans, we don't take what they are publishing in the papers and the statement that they're making right now seriously. And the reason is, if you look at, I think there's a travel, I cannot remember where really the government officials were going. And the president himself came out and said that I'm slashing the numbers and I'm reducing the numbers of people traveling. But we still know that some of those people ended up in that trip. So we need to stop treating Kenyans to all this PR, because to me this is just a PR exercise where you're trying to manage the Kenyans, because right now there's some serious uproar. When you listen to each and every Kenyan out there, people are complaining, and I think they're just trying to manage the Kenyans generally and telling them, okay, wait a minute, something is being done. But if you look at it seriously, I mean, to me, there's very minimal, if anything, that the government is actually doing to address these issues.
And you said something very interesting about Kenyans being managed.
Yeah.
Do you feel that in this communication by the president in his speech on Jamhuri Day, saying that we are now free from that debt crisis, that it's one of those instances where we're just being managed?
Yeah, I mean, for me, yes, to an extent, yes, it does manage people's expectations, and he actually expects that now maybe people will change their attitude towards government. The fact is, there's very little that they have, it's actually some very little that they have given at this stage, while people are actually desperate. Today, as I was coming, I was looking at my WhatsApp, and I've been added to more than 10 WhatsApp groups by people I know, my friends. And these are WhatsApp groups either to raise money for medical, for people to be taken to hospital, or for funeral expenses, or for other people who are suffering somewhere, and even for school fees. So we really want to see him and his government actually address the real issues that face Mwananchi is facing at the grassroots. Does this inspire hope, what they have done? No, to me it doesn't.
It must have been the president's intention that he would, rather than paint a grim picture to Kenyans on Jamhuri Day, that he would inspire some sense of optimism, some hope, even in a situation that would appear hopeless. Did you buy it, Nerima?
The president, did you want to say something?
No, go, my dear. Okay.
The president is a symbol of unity. He has to be a symbol of hope. Yes, the president has to sell hope to keep the country sane. As to why we wake up every day very early and work hard and build a nation. He's a very good orator. I love the way our president speaks, and a lot of times the things that he speaks, he has researched. In fact, a lot of his research tends to be factual. Not all of it, but a lot of it, especially in his State of the Nation addresses. You can find a bit of the loopholes, but very minimal. And he's someone that knows how to speak to people. And I know that he has built a reputation of being an African leader. If you travel in this region, which I do, people really admire our president and even how he articulates himself, and he seems to know matters on hand. So yes, there are areas that I did buy, but there are particular areas that I feel disconnect.
On that particular issue of the economy, the fact that he says we are now in safe space in as far as the debt issue is concerned, and that was to inspire confidence in the economy that we are now in a comfortable space. And this only came a week after his CS for Treasury said we are broke.
Yes, his CS spoke a week ago and also earlier this year saying the same statement. It was not the first time that he spoke, but also for Kenyan people, what they're seeing is the cost of products is still high. They're seeing the cost of products being high, and the president, on the other hand, is saying that the economy is doing better. Statistically, it's showing that the economy is doing better. It is. So a lot of people are still feeling the pinch. And that's why I'm saying that's where the disconnect is. Because right now, the whole debate is around, we've seen petrol going down by a few shillings, and also diesel, and also kerosene. But Kenyans are still feeling that, no, this is not the expectation that we had. We expected it to be lower. And again, it's going back to what Kathy is saying, where Kenyans are feeling like they're being managed, because now it's December, we're going into the holidays. Maybe they're doing it to make us feel a little bit better. But statistically, the economy is doing better.
If at all the economy was doing better, Kenyans would feel it. It's not something you have to be told. You would feel it. Are Kenyans feeling it? Because the messages are mixed. And I remember not just the CS for Treasury, even CS for Energy, a few months back, talking about and giving a prediction that the prices of fuel could actually continue going up to 300, and he made that pronouncement himself. Then the CSS say one thing, the president says another, and there's a question on whether or not you're being managed. You're still not feeling it in your pocket. What is your assessment of this, even in as far as government communication is concerned?
The assessment really is just the very fact that the message is not constant and the message is not flowing tells you that someone is lying. You know, if the truth is just the truth, but when this one says this and this one says that, then someone is lying along that line. But really, Fred, first and foremost, Kenyans have been pushing for a debt register for us to know what we have, what we owe. Do we have a debt register? So where was it ticked that now we are out of the woods? Number two, to make an economy better, to stabilize the shilling against the dollar and major world currencies, that is not done by mere political declarations along the markets and in podiums. It takes major economic kind of decisions. And you know who is the president advisor on matters of the economy? It is David D. Now, some of us follow him on Twitter. If the president's advisor is painting a bad picture, then who am I to trust if the advisor himself? In fact, I remember the other day he said that when a patient is in the ICU, how do you want me to tell you whether the patient will go back to the ward or to the mortuary? He was describing Kenya as a patient in the ICU. So for me, my major concern has been this kind of talk that is, as Kathy has put it, political PR exercise, and yet someone would argue, so what was the debt exactly? If we are out of the woods, it has reduced from what to what? What has been done with it, how long? And you know, if you want to, you know, one of the campaign promises by Kenya Kwanza, and one of the phrases they loved the most, they used to say that in Kenya, we have a shortage of fools. Now that we have a shortage of fools, Kenyans are asking questions. The prices of basic commodities is going high, but their incomes are not changing. They are where they were, and at worst, they're actually lacking. TIFA, which is a poll agency research, TOMOF, they did a research this week. They said that 82% of Kenyans feel like the country is not doing well, 82%. In fact, the same 82% predicted that they don't feel like there's hope, or the words they use in research. 82% of us cannot be wrong that we are feeling the pinch in our pocket. Even if, and as Nerima has said, we have austerities in our own homes. Some of the things that we'd take for the fun of it have now become luxuries. Now imagine people who don't have predictable income. Remember, many of us in Nairobi are in the informal sector. So really, if the people you are governing are saying that they are not feeling good in the pocket, whatever you say is good for the PR exercise, but it is not translating to their pocket. Then there's a disconnect between you and your policies and the people who are being governed.
Okay.
That is where we are.
There's definitely a disconnect somewhere, and we seem to agree. And we'll continue this conversation after the break. You can be part of it as well on social media, on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. You're watching Morning Cafe. Back, you're watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. I'm still in studio with Kathy Rungu, political leader, Nerima Wako, CEO, Siasa Place, and Wanja Maina, national chairperson, Jubilee Party, PWD's League. And we continue looking at the state of the economy, the state of the nation, and vis-a-vis the kind of communication we're getting from the government. And Wanja, just before the break, you mentioned that TIFA poll. Yes, Kenyans got to express themselves. Of course, I've hosted politicians who are very quick to dismiss that poll immediately after. But Kenyans, according to the poll, at least are not feeling any relief just yet. This morning, at least, the price of fuel has gone down by 5 shillings a litre. And probably that's the very first sense of relief, albeit marginally, in a very long time. But with the kind of communication we're getting from the CSs, from the economic advisors, and these people have no reason to tell us the economy is doing bad, if at all it's doing good, Kathy. Don't you think that probably the president should come out and at least attempt to give us more than just hope? That, as Wanja pointed out, probably that debt register, if at all the debt issue is our biggest problem. Don't you think we deserve more than just hope?
Yeah, I think in Ndimuli, we actually deserve more as a country because, number one, let's appreciate that most Kenyans now have gone to school. And even as you try to sell that hope, and I actually want to fault the KK government for one reason. The way they ascended to power is by selling hope, you know, and I remember even during the inauguration, which I actually attended myself, the thing was everybody was waiting for some magic. Everybody was waiting for things to change drastically because they had actually promised tukiweka Biblia chini, you know, bei ya unga will go down. Up to now, there's so many of those things that they promised the Kenyan citizens that they have not been able to achieve. And I actually do not see them achieving those things. In fact, the most honorable thing that the government should do now is actually to come out to Kenyans and just tell them the truth, that some of the things that we promised during the campaigns are actually not possible, they are not tenable. That is the best thing that they can do to us because, for how long are they going to sell this hope? We actually deserve to be told the truth. If you look, actually, you said it very well, that they seem to be speaking from both sides of their mouth, that the CS is saying this and the president will say this the following day. The deputy president, just the other day, I think it's like 2 days ago, he said that they found an economy that was actually in the ICU. And they are doing everything possible to actually get us back to our, normal state. But the question is, these are the same people who are spending 4.3 billion on international travels within a period of 3 months, really. Are these people who found the economy in the ICU? That is not true. That is not true. What I would actually would like to urge as a leader is for the leadership of this country to try and be more honest. To me, there's actually a very thin line between what they keep telling us and lies. Wanja actually called it lying blatantly. Okay. And this must stop. Now, let's appreciate that wajinga waliisha Kenya. That is what they were telling us during the campaigns. And now it is time for them to come out and tell us the truth. Let them tell us this is possible and this is not possible.
Okay. Yeah. The kind of picture painted about the situation we're in is that it is dire. It is a crisis. And if we may compare ourselves to the other countries that have experienced such crisis, we see what is happening in Ghana. They are in a lot of trouble. Ethiopia too, unable to pay, or they are defaulting on a Eurobond or something that we have here. And we are at risk of defaulting as well. And what they're facing, Zimbabwe too. So yet what we are seeing back home in terms of these austerity measures does not really balance with the other kind of reality we're seeing, the government's ambitions. If at all we're doing so badly, and if at all we're staring at what we are seeing our other African neighbors facing, shouldn't we tame some of our ambitions, at least for now, so that we could recover? Because issues like, for example, the affordable housing project, which is not really an issue of production, but rather you could say also consumption. Don't you think that probably the government is too ambitious, and in its ambitions, it's communicating something totally different to Kenyans?
This government is extremely ambitious, and it started even during the campaigns. Campaigns started way in advance. A lot of people had already said that there was no way they were clenching that seat. and a lot of individuals believed that they were wasting a lot of their time compared to the Azimio coalition. So ambition is not something new to this administration. So when they came in with that bravado and gusto of ambition. But I do think that a lot needs to be cut in corruption. I believe that that's where a lot of issues have been silent. Public finance management is a major challenge in our country right now. And when we see in the front page of the Standard, the two completely contrasting stories of how the Freedom for Rotich exposes state agencies, and side by side, we see Ruto is after me over 15 billion whistleblowing. These two stories have been put on the front cover to send a message that there is a lot going on in our country in terms of mismanagement of resources, and we're seeing individuals are not being held accountable for that. I truly believe that if we were to plug the holes in those particular areas, we would be able to save a lot of resources as a nation and be able to talk about our debt being reprived, and we can talk about building our nation. But as long as we ignore the amount of corruption that's occurring, even Wanja has even mentioned it earlier, then there's no way we're able to build a nation. We will continue to borrow, we will continue to request for resources, and we will continue to lose it due to the corruption. That is the loophole that I'm concerned about even more.
Do you feel this administration is paying enough attention to that issue, the fight against graft?
Not enough. We have heard several times that they say that they will, that they would like to. They've actually reached out to civil society. We've had a number of meetings with government. They say that the goodwill is there, but we do not see enough action being taken in regard to corruption. I do not think so.
From a governance perspective, Wanja, yes, you can continue giving Kenyans hope, but Kenyans will continue feeling the pinch until something substantive does happen. For how long do you think Kenyans can take it, if at all something doesn't happen? Because as they painted and as senior government officials that you've all quoted saying, we are not doing that well.
Okay, right. For how long? I think I will quote a lady I saw in one of the local TVs, and she said, enough is enough. So for how long? I think people are just, the river is at the seams. It is likely really to burst, and here's why. You see, when people are feeling like, for example, this is a story, and this is a story. So when people are feeling like there are people who are traveling in billions, one would wonder, kwani Kenya kuna pesa mingi aje, such that people are traveling abroad within 3 months in billions? You know how many zeros a billion has? It has very many intimidating zeros. I think there are 10, or is it 9? Maybe I don't even know. And then you contrast that to a person who is struggling to put food in the table of their children. What that brings about is some sort of resentment. And I saw that during Jamhuri Day, when I listened to a Kenyan, alisema, in this country, and that video was being shared by many, in this country, you are better off as a dog than as a Kenyan, because a dog can eat in the pits. And he said the reason why he came to Jamhuri Day is because he had been mobilized by the local administration and he will be given something, and that is why he left his home. Now that is a person who is not patriotic. He didn't come there to celebrate the Kenya is 60. Kenya imeanza kuwa grandfather sasa. We don't have basic teething problems. Because you know Kenya is symbolic. When you are 60, your kids are grown, uko vizuri, hauna shida ndogo ndogo. But how can you be 60 with teething problems like poverty, disease, what? The things that were being fought for when Kenya was being started. To answer you for how long, I'll just say what Neriba has said. In chapter 12, ya public finance management. And you know what that brings about is just inequality, where people are wondering, because you know this issue of graft, this issue of patriotism, this issue of feeling like even if I see a bad thing happening, I'll go and report. It comes from, you know, during Kibaki's time, police walikuwa nashikwa wanapelekwa na wananchi kwa police station. Why? Because they had seen that this person is harassed. Within 100 days, amechukua watoto, akawapeleka school for free. And that is what was inspiring people to even take action against graft. But now if I see graft in my local neighborhood, I'll ask myself, kama huyu mama controller of budgets mwenye amesoma kabisa anashikwa na intimidatiwa, who am I, me as a small mama boga? So this issue of Kenyans feeling disoriented, feeling left out, is taking away what is called patriotism. And when people are not patriotic to their country, they can do anything. We have seen a mass exodus and migration of Kenyans going abroad. Unawapata kwa passport. If you go to the airport, you'll see very many young girls and young men going abroad. Our president now is also intending to export us. You know, when the president is saying that nimewatafutia kazi Dubai, low-cost jobs, you wonder, see, this country is the one we are supposed to build. So every day, and you mentioned the issue of housing, the government's priorities have been gotten upside down. Who told them that we need houses? One of the beauties of the new constitution here, 2010, was the issue of public participation. And public participation is not you telling wananchi what is good for them. It is you meeting them under a mango tree, you co-create what is good for them. Many Kenyans are asking, mambo ya nyumba kwanza wacha, tuanze na basics, food, education, vitu kama hizo. Our university students are in school na wengine wataenda in January. Where is the help? They are protesting. School fees imeenda juu. Exams, we saw how even children themselves, the adults are disoriented, the children are disoriented. For as long as you're having a teenager asking, when you taxed my marks? Because this is a child who sat for KCPE, very naive and optimistic about the future. Marks moja imepotea. One child was given a marks of sign language and she never did that exam. That tells you that cures are everywhere, including cures that is affecting the trajectory of the future of a child in the coming days, because how you perform KCPE determines how you'll go to high school and maybe how your life will be. So for me, where we are at, even as a country, is that Kenyans are generally resilient, no doubt, but suffering is not a right. Patient. And it's not. But suffering is not a rite of passage, because this thing that we have always been told, Kenyans are resilient. So you have to beat us and beat us and beat us because we are resilient. Our resilience is good when it is really necessary, but you can't push us too much. You can't push us everywhere we look, everywhere we go. Okay. So those are the issues that are affecting
And you raised an important issue about public participation. It is a phrase that we loosely throw around, despite it being in our constitution, that public participation is key in these key decision-making processes. At what point should the Kenyan come in? Because is it just when things are good that we only participate as a public to say how money will be spent? If at all our situation is bad, regardless of who is to blame, it is our country. Kenyans should be involved in getting it back on track. It is not just the government, it is the Kenyan. How come we're not involving the Kenyan and telling the Kenyan the truth that this situation is bad and it will take us time to actually recover, and we need to pull together towards recovery? How come no one is talking about that? It's just hope to Kenyans who expect that in the next 3 months things will change. Kathy.
Indimuli, I hear this. I'm not sure. I'm not a representative of this government, so let's treat this as hearsay. I hear there's going to be a referendum soon. Let them there. The reason why the government or our representative do not want to engage the masses is because they actually know the truth. That is number one. They know if they went to the ground and they start engaging Mwananchi, if they start engaging Wanjiku, especially on this issue of affordable houses or whatever they call it, which actually the government is hell-bent and they really want to make it happen, The court tried to stop it, and now Kimani Ichung'wah has a bill and he has taken it to the floor of the House because it must happen. It must happen. So I do not see the goodwill, I do not see the intention by government to involve Wanjiku. The government actually wants to force everything down Wanjiku's throat, and that one is very clear. If you look at the issue of the CASs, the 50 CASs, the appointments or that was stopped by the court. What has happened? Again, there's a bill that has been taken by the same Ichung'wah to the floor of the House because the 50 CASs must be there. So I do not see the intention at all by the government to engage Wanjiku. Now, if you don't engage Wanjiku, and you wait until 2017 and then present yourself to the people with handouts, Wanjiku is likely to elect you. And the politicians know this very well. To me, in as much as we continue having this kind of a conversation, you know, there's a conversation and there's a lot of work that also needs to happen at the grassroots. And I think that is where now my friend Nelima here comes in, and the civil society and all the grassroots organizations out there. We need to educate Mwananchi that they actually have a right and they can actually speak for that right. Yeah? I saw the other day when His Excellency Raila Odinga called for maandamano, people from a certain section of this country said, no, we won't come out for the maandamano because maandamano affects our business. But just the other day, the same people are saying, please, Baba, come out, we are ready for maandamano now. We need to have a conversation, even amongst us, as citizens, a very serious conversation that things cannot continue being done the same way. And I speak this in Dimuli as someone who has dealt with electorates. I've been a candidate twice. And I can tell you, some of the things that we keep addressing in boardrooms, during this kind of conversation that we're having here, the problem starts with Wanjiku. So public participation needs to be done in a different way. The kind of public participation that we do in this country is a public participation where the leader goes to the ground with handouts, all right, puts people in a hall and pretends to be doing public participation. Most of the people who are brought to those halls are not leaders. They are actually hecklers. So they will be brought to the halls. They will be told, you know what, the governor wants to do A, B, C. The executive wants to achieve this, and they just support it. It is more of a political forum than an engagement or a dialogue where the people need to speak to the leaders and they are given an equal opportunity to present their views. That does not happen. That does not happen. So we need to change the way we do our public participation.
And the pain that Kenyans are feeling now, is there any dividend to be gotten from that pain? That probably with enough pain, if at all it is going to get there, that Kenyans will wake up from their lethargy or from their reluctance to be involved in these discussions and probably push for their voices to be heard, even through the ballot. Because as Kathy rightly put it, you may trample on Kenyans for 4 years, and then towards the tail end, you give them a carrot and they re-elect you back. But it means that Kenyans are not having the serious discussion, or they do not understand the consequence of their actions at the ballot. Do you think that the pain could actually bear any fruit?
The pain has to bear fruit. So there are two types of pain. It's either pain that will lead to death or pain that teaches you to grow. And I'm hoping for the Kenyan people, it's a pain that teaches us to grow. Because we've seen multiple times, Wanja has already mentioned what happened when Kibaki entered power after Moi. We've seen how Kenyans felt pain and they said enough. So that has happened before. So history has a sense of repeating itself. And we as Kenyan people, there's a point where it will get to that point and we make a decision. But I feel we are doing it now. We might be doing it so slowly, maybe we're not seeing that we're moving, but I see it because even with the work with public participation that we do in the counties, when you just look at a simple position like MCA, the MCAs do not return. The ones who are not performing, it is the highest turnover you will see in any government. County Assembly, MCA is the best case study to take. The people will notice this individual was able to buy a lot of houses, buy a lot of land. We never saw them. We're not putting them back in. So Kenyans think and Kenyans decide. It's at the different sectors and levels that we do not necessarily understand the particular roles. So when you see promises being made, or when you see instances where particular legislation, before they even are tabled, public participation has to occur, the Kenyan people might not necessarily know that I was supposed to be involved in this process. So it's brought about debate. The fact that we have even debated the Finance Act, for me, it makes me excited that Kenyans are upset that my opinion that I shared was not tabled and taken to the floor. Okay. This for me is growth. And secondly, we're also seeing how our representatives are behaving. Let me tell you, Kenyans are watching. Because if they can agree on an issue where we have felt that in agreement, hatutaki ikitu, but you have gone and you've said it is okay. But then when it comes to CDF, you're able to walk out You're able to make the entire process halt and come to a standstill, and you've refused to close for session because this decision must be made in an avenue that you all agree. So we can see you can agree on an issue and you can decide, but when it comes to the Kenyan people, that they feel it's important, you're silent. So I think that Kenyans are definitely participating, and for us at Siasa Place, it's about young people especially participating. Because even when you look at the region globally, participation is on the decline. When you see, African countries going into military coups, that is very scary. We've had almost 8.
And it's said that every 30 years there occurs a sort of a generational change in politics, and Kenya is now 60. We saw that after 30 years of independence, 30 years after independence, that's basically in the 90s, there was a major shift, especially in how democracy worked with the advent of multi-party democracy. The agitation started early 90s and probably materialized towards the end of that decade. Now we are at the end of the other 30 years. Are you seeing a sense of change probably in our thinking? Are we ripe for that generational change in leadership? Probably the hardships we are experiencing now indicative of something. Is that what we are going through right now, Wanja?
Wow, is that what we are going through? Are we ripe? Those are real big generational change. Are we ripe? Is this good for our country for the next 30 years? I think we shall revisit this conversation in 2053. I hope we'll all be around. I think our forefathers and even the people who fought for the first liberation, the second in the 90s, when they were doing the Lord's work, when they were fighting for this country, inspired by patriotism, they would turn in their graves now if they came back and found that most of our policies in government are inspired by the World Bank and by the IMF. They would ask themselves, so we did all this work of sleeping in the Abadia forest, being beaten, leaving our wives, our children, to still be in the bondages of our colonizers 60 years later. Most of the policies by Kenya Kwanza are inspired by some of these Bretton Woods institutions. We have seen them giving debates and arguments that what they are implementing in some of these fiscal policies that they're having is because the IMF, and I remember one of the senators saying that even the World Bank thinks that's a good idea. You see, Kenya is not a colony of international monetary institutions. Kenya is a free country. When you talk about the word jamhuri, hiyo ni nchi yako, mnajitawala vile mnataka, mnatumia ideas zenu. And if we have to work with international world, we have to co-create together. They have to work with us on our terms. But for as long as wananchi, the people you are governing, and you have asked a good questions, is there a dividend for this pain? I don't see a dividend for me sleeping hungry today and tomorrow so that I can be full next week. Hunger cannot be postponed. If my children fail to go to school in first term, in second term, in third term, they are missing major milestones for their lives. If you go now to the villages, some of the social issues we are seeing is teenage pregnancies. Vijana Mount Kenya wanambao wamevuta vitu mbaya mbaya. Why? Because you have come to a community and you are not giving equitable and equal resources, and the people are asking, how come we vote so well, but when it comes to resources, you are not giving us what we are asking, which is 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. So if really we are talking about a big major shift for the next 30 years, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to introspect and ask ourselves, how come all of a sudden we have become a darling of Western countries? How come our neighbors, our South Africans and the major worlds are saying, wait, we can rethink this kind of international architecture and form something like BRICS, for example? How come we are even asking for a proper negotiation and readjustment of these loans? And how come now Kenya has certainly become a very good case study for how to work with the Bretton Woods institutions? some of the things that we are crying about is an unfair, a win-lose relationship with the Western countries. And for me, if we are going to talk about the next 30 years, and Nerima works a lot with the youth are 65%, it is highly important for us to start pushing back against some of these friendships that do not benefit us.
Okay.
It is important for us to start asking, if you are saying that you are subsidizing production and not consumption, for the last 11 or 12 months that you've been in power, what has shifted, what has changed exactly? Because if you are subsidized production, the mahindi that was planted then should have grown, and the food and maize flour and wheat should have been cheaper. For me, what I'm seeing is us going back to many years. Our forefathers would be very disappointed with us if they came about and realized that the people we really pushed against are still here with us, determining what will be in my cup of tea and what will be in my plate for dinner.
Okay. But Kathy, they say that even that 30 years that we're talking about, it's usually a cyclic effect, that it starts off very well with a renewal, a reawakening, and then matters start regressing, and by the end of the 30 years, the situation is so bad to crisis level that it forces the change. Do you think we've gotten there yet as a country enough, or do you feel it will still take us more time to get to a point where now it is everything has ground to a halt and now for some change?
I think all is not lost. And let me start by saying that when you look at the voting pattern in this country and how we elect our leaders, the reason why we were able to get the likes of Mwai Kibaki in 2002, because that's the first time that I voted myself, is because Kenyans had reached a point where they had said what Wanja said earlier. I mean, enough is enough. And remember the struggle that had happened within the 24 years rule of President Moi. And now people were feeling that really we need something different. We've suffered enough. Now, after that, then we had President Kibaki for 10 years. And then as President Kibaki was retiring, then we got these new guys who came and told us, we are digital, you know, and we are going to digitize things, and we are coming to bring fresh things, and that kind of the newness. And then now the Kenya Kwanza government. If you ask me, what needs to actually change is the way, is the manifestos and how we build our political parties, because that is where all these people start from. The parties that came during the multi-party, as we were fighting for the multi-party democracy, Kenya DP and those other parties, their manifesto and everything that they were communicating and saying was actually serious. They seemed to be, they were actually addressing issues, real issues that the country was struggling with at that stage. The parties that have come thereafter have not done much in terms of addressing the real issues that Mwananchi is suffering with or struggling with. Wanja mentioned the TIFA report. One of the other things that the TIFA report also said is that most Kenyans have lost hope in political parties. But remember, the political parties are the vehicles through which we get to elect our leaders. So we also need to stop this hula baloo of it's the yellow time, you know, or green time, or red time, and therefore everybody dons on a cape that is yellow. Now we need to start building political parties that address the real issues that we struggle with. Unfortunately, there seems to be some very serious focus and fight for that which our forefathers fought for, which is multipartyism. We seem to be caging and actually gagging people from even registering new political parties and other things like those. We need to open up that space so that we can also bring new leaders at a time like this. Like you say, every 30 years, it seems like a cycle. But you know, it's quite interesting. Look at the leaders we have today. You know, people say, same monkeys, different forests. At times I wonder, you know, when I listen to most of the people in the KK government, every time they criticize the Uhuru government or the Jubilee government, I keep asking myself, these are the same people that were in government that time. I mean, Mheshimiwa Kimani Ichung'wah was the leader of majority. No, he was the
chair,
the chair of budget committee.
Yeah.
So when you tell us that there is money that was squandered and mismanaged by the previous government, yet you were the chair of the budget committee, what are you telling us?
Okay.
When you listen to the current president tell us that there are so many wrongs that happened during that regime, yet he was the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, what are you telling us? We need to get a bit serious. And now we need to start having parties that address real issues and also having political leaders that have the best interest of Kenyans at heart.
Fine, and that conversation is probably what we're still having, even as we look at this issue about the 30 years generational change. And if we may draw parallels with the conduct of the Houses of Parliament, especially the National Assembly, because, and we say probably at independence, the very first House of Legislation was a very respectable one with very astute individuals. But they say that its quality degenerated towards the end of the initial 30 years, and by the time we were getting to the 90s, many people were not comfortable with how Parliament was behaving. Are we seeing something similar that after, in this second 30-year cycle, that the first Parliament we saw with the likes of Martha Karua, James Orengo, and now in comparison to the kind of National Assembly we have now and its conduct, do you see a cycle, Nirima?
Absolutely, and I agree with Kathy in terms of political party participation. When you have political parties that can only be formed based on wealth, it's very expensive to form a political party. And another thing is also most of our political parties are led by men, and we have a number of parties that majority of the members are men, and you have also the struggle of representation. That's why it's not a shock to see the low representation of women in parliament. But I know that's not what we're talking about, but it's important because representation matters, because also issues that are tabled come from the people themselves. Where you have a majority of the population not part of that process, you won't have the issues on the table, one. But number two, also we see a sense of control. Because the parties have leaders that own these particular parties, they're the ones who determine who's going to receive those tickets. As soon as you enter, you have not been elected by the public. It has been, you have been put there by the party and the party leader himself. And so now you are answerable to the party leader. So we have seen a sense of losing that voice. We have seen that as soon as we have a dissenting voice, we have seen members being ostracized, losing their positions in particular committees, and a lot of them being afraid to speak up against the general flow of the day. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. We need to have braver individuals. And I would say even it's very easy for me to mention my senator, because Senator Okiya Mtata, he is very brave because he's independent.
That's true. Yeah.
There's nobody pulling the strings for him. And so you begin to question, and even when you see young people engaging, they're debating whether to enter as independent candidates instead. Because maybe there I can actually represent the voice of my people who have put me in power, rather than falling suit or falling in line.
Do you think that that would be probably a solution, even as we speak about the generational change of leaders, that moving away from political parties appears, you say, to be
at this point,
more beneficial to the electorate?
At this point, by the way, we're seeing the results. And I also think that a lot of young people were really kicked out of 2022 from their parties. Very potential young people and women who were forced to step down because they didn't have enough money to be able to convince the party to pick them, or the party just didn't see them as adding value. And I do believe that there are going to be people who have said it's enough, and they're going to go in independently, and they will be elected.
Is that why we are seeing the deterioration of the quality of the National Assembly especially? Because it has come under a lot of criticism for ceding ground to the executive, for being a simple rubber stamp, for on issues of national importance like privatization. They abdicated on their role and passed a law to ensure they will not be part of the process. Generally speaking, the conduct of this 13th Parliament leaves a lot to be desired, don't you think?
A lot to be desired indeed. In the language of somewhere, they say that the fish rots from the head. Let us start with the speaker. The Azimio coalition had the intention and communicated with the speaker that they intend to remove Sabina Chege, and their preferred candidate is Mark Mwenje. The speaker got the information, he refused to act. People went to court, and it took a lot of pressure for him to act based on the preferences of the Azimio coalition. But let's also go to the speaker. And the reason why I'm particularly keen on the speaker, it is because of the separation of powers, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The Speaker of the National Assembly is a key stakeholder in the Kenya Kwanza coalition. Therefore, the Speaker, is he truly independent if he is a coalition partner in the Kenya Kwanza administration, who is the executive?
You have to be fair to him. He was elected through a democratic process in the House.
It is democracy, but there's a gray area there in terms of how really, truly, the separation of powers. But that said, that same bunge, how the MPs voted during the finance bill that is now an act was dramatic. It was thinking to the high heavens. Researchers and pollers said that 90% of Kenyans have said that the finance bill is not good for them. The wabunges, you could tell they are a bit scared, nini. On that voting day, it was not even a secret ballot. It was just, you are mentioned and you say, you agree or you disagree. Guess what happened? They agreed. Nerima has said that those who are dissenting in principle, they are treated badly. We saw what happened to Adhoni Wamuchomba. She has said that herself in many forums, how she has become a pariah in that house that is Kenya Kwanza. But really, let me just talk a bit about multipartyism, because our party is the walking figure of what it means to be disturbed in a multi-party democracy. I've never seen the amount of litigation that I've seen in one political party in less than 1 year. Jubilee Party has become a party that has been harassed from east to west to south to north. Sabotage, direct interest from the top Kenya Kwanza administration, divide and rule, take them to court, buy people, give them money. The multi-party democracy that we pride ourselves in is the reason why we are with you here in this studio. Because the multi-party, the war that was fought in the 90s, was even war to support media freedom. At that time, hata ungeongea vitu mingi, because it was Voice of Kenya, which was a government-owned media agency. So the war for multi-party was the war on press freedom. It was war on freedom of association and freedom to talk the way you wish. So when I see, and Nerima has really alluded to it, the more we have pluralism and the more we have many political parties, it creates an avenue for special interest groups like me. We are all here special interest group, according to 100, to participate. Why? If I can't get room in the major top 4 political parties, at least there are 80 other political parties where I can exercise my leadership and grow along that path. So the moment there is sabotage of political parties, it means special interest groups and people who traditionally would not fit the mold of who a politician is will not have room to exercise their politics. So affecting multi-party is affecting special interest groups overall. But you see, the bad guys, I quote unquote, do not only come for us in opposition. There has been pressure in Kenya Kwanza for the Kenya Kwanza allied political parties to fold and form one big political juggernaut. I saw the SG of Ford Kenya not happy with that. I saw many SGs of parties that form the Kenya Kwanza coalition not happy with that. Why? Because we are saying the law allows us to form a coalition agreement based on the constitution we've made ourselves. But the moment we start the journey and we start the bus, Safari Kifika Naivasha, you start to say, let's fold and form one big political juggernaut. What are you saying? You are saying then that the big brother is more superior than all others. It is also bad for the people who are inside of those specific political parties, because we know the crises and the challenges that come with coalition management. So for me, when I see the war on democracy, multi-party democracy, when I see sabotage of political parties, what I see is that we have started a new journey to dictatorship. We started a new journey to a country where we will now have less freedoms to talk. Before you know it, we shall have less media freedoms. And it seems like it already started if we remember what one of the CSS described one of the media houses in Kimathi Street.
Okay. And let's go back to the issue of pain, even as we look at this cycle that you talk about. There was pain pre-independence. That pain was enough to force a change, the push towards independence. There was pain towards the tail end of the 80s that forced the push for multi-party democracy. And that probably was the biggest dividend to be gained from that push. There's pain now. But the question is, do you see this pain in the faces of Kenyans enough to jolt them from their reluctance to be part of this conversation? Because as it is right now, we're dealing with a generation that is least interested even in voting. They did not take part in the last election. Yet the pain is there. The question is, will this pain push towards something?
Yeah, it's very important for us to look at statistics. The last general election, this is how people voted. 33% of the people voted for Raila Odinga. 33% of the people voted for His Excellency William Ruto. There's a good 33% that didn't vote. That tells you something. In my interactions with people, because personally, I had participated in the 2013 general election as a candidate. I had participated again in 2017. In 2022, I actually took a back seat and I was almost an observer. But I was actually interacting with people very well, and I was trying to ask people to come out and vote. I was actually doing that campaign, but let me tell you what happened. Quite a good number, and I'm sure Nelima here did the same kind of exercise with the young people. People were like, why should I even come out to vote? Sasa naenda kupiga kura ya nini? I'm just going to vote the same people. And you ask them why, they say, look at A and B, the options that we have, A, B, C, D, I don't see any reason why I should come out and vote. So when you look, we start talking about the pain and whether our Kenyan citizenry have felt enough pain. My question is, the answer is yes, but are they ready to act? I don't think so. I don't think so. A lot needs to happen. There's enough civic education that used to happen during those periods, those times that we have talked about, especially during the DP times, And guys were very, when you went to Mashinani, people were very sensitized. People understood quite a number of issues.
Was it as a result of civic education or just a general psyche of the nation?
No, there was enough.
The pain was common.
There was enough civic education that was happening at that time. If you look at the recent year, going back, even to 2012, 2013, there's a lot of freedom, something that Wanja has expressed here, of even the civil society, the NGOs that used to participate, that space has shrunk. And there are very few people, fewer and fewer organizations that have come out to talk to people about these issues. Should we lose hope? No. I'm happy that we still have organizations like Nelima's and others. The most unfortunate thing is that there's a deliberate move by the administration to try and have most of these organizations sing their choruses. That is the problem. Because as a civil society, your work is actually to tell people the truth. It's not to take sides. You're supposed to tell people, okay, I think, and actually criticizing is not wrong. Criticizing is not wrong. And even agreeing where things are being done the right way is right. Yes. But we need to start having a very honest conversation. But having said that, let me tell you, when you go to the grassroots and start interacting with the voter, Wanjiku is not as vulnerable as we think. Wanjiku is also an enemy of herself. Because, the moment, and I know, I'm happy that Kenyans are listening to this kind of conversation. When you interact with voters, the first thing they ask you, Indimuli, how much money do you have? you're coming to this contest because you're running against Wanja. How much money do we have? Or do you have? At what point did we agree as a nation that we are going to measure and to weigh and agree that we're going to vote for that person A against person B just because of how deep their pockets are? That is where our problems start. There's something that you had asked Nelima, and she answered very well. But it is very, very expensive to run as an independent candidate. Mm-hmm. That is why you see most political parties will actually, you know, for a political party to decide that they are going to support candidate A or to issue that nomination certificate to candidate A, then that candidate most of the time is actually the person who sings that chorus of the political party. Mm-hmm. Most independent-minded leaders in this country do not get to the ballot. Mm-hmm. And most political parties don't like them. A few lucky independent-minded political leaders, like the Member of Parliament for Kasarani, let's use that as an example. He's a young person. I believe for him to clinch that seat, it was very expensive. And we all know.
Expensive in terms of
funding the campaign. Yeah, the financials.
Okay.
It's very expensive to run.
To clinch the ticket or to clinch the seat?
The seat.
Okay.
Because basically, you see, you don't need the ticket. All what you need as an independent candidate is to register with Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, and you register your symbols and your names, and there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nerima, when the advent of multi-party democracy, people imagined that multi-partyism would be the remedy for the issues we had. Now we're talking about political parties being the problem to our politics. This is at the end of the next 30 years. The civil society, too, has come under criticism.
Yes.
That the role it played in the fight for multi-party democracy was commendable. Mm-hmm. Towards the tail end of this next 30 years, it is almost negligible. What happened? Because yes, we've talked about the role of the legislature and the fact that it has come under criticism for not playing its role even as an arm of government. We've talked about the electorate and where they're failing. Of course, the executive and the political elite, it's obvious we started with that. But the civil society, what happened to that? In as far as enabling the electorate to make better decisions?
Actually, a lot has happened in the time period, in civil society and in the religious spaces as well. Because even when we think about the 90s, the people who were involved in terms of change is students, religious leaders, civil society combined. All those three institutions I've mentioned.
They're very quiet this time around. The students are not anywhere. The church has changed, and the civil society as well.
Correct. And so we've seen a lot of things have led to that particular change. And I can talk about civil society. For civil society, a lot of members actually joined government. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there was a brain drain in terms of, even when you look at the activists that we could mention in the 90s, they are currently serving if they have not passed away. And even right now, we have CSs that are former activists, governors who are former activists. So when they leave, there's no mentorship of the next generation of civil society leaders. So what I am actually witnessing is a gap within civil society. And the ones who have remained, it has also become extremely difficult to do the work that we do. One, the population has increased. We're talking about we're now 50 million plus, and also we're talking about the vastness of our country in terms of traversing, but most civil society organizations are donor funded or even supported by the community through crowdsourcing, but that's very difficult for them to sustain. So even doing the work that we do is very difficult to do. And even when we look at religious institutions, they also got involved in politics. A lot of them are the most political, especially during campaigns. Politicians will first go to churches, making sure that they even share their manifestos, their ideas, partnering with churches, having religious leaders supporting them. So also, within that space, we've seen a lot of conquering in terms of dividing, so divide and rule. And even for students, that one is a whole other agenda, because we've seen the Universities Amendment Act coming into play, which now removes how students directly vote for their secretary general or leadership. That also reduces the amount of power that student leaders have on campus, which also reduces their mobilization, which also reduces the engagement. So even right now, if you ask students if they're involved in political processes on campus, very minimal. That number has reduced drastically.
Wow.
And many of them, they are not concerned. So it has been a ripple effect of issues occurring in the different sectors and creating this combined new Kenya that we're seeing. But I do believe that organizing is changing. Kenyans, they are very vocal online. It's just to be able to translate that online anger into actual physical engagement, and physical engagement where now we identify who are the leaders that we would like to prop up. So it's not surprising to me when we see comedians having a very large following and able to fundraise within hours to support people. Basically, he's a politician, just without the title.
And probably as we wrap up, because we're out of time, as you make your final remarks, how do you see this new generational change? What are some of the things you think will trigger that? And what are some of the factors, as you say, the online population and the online discourse probably will be? Because now, as we say, the catalysts of the change back in the 90s are no longer as active. If students are not there, the civil society is weakened greatly, and the church has already shifted its position.
I believe, so Fred, I believe it's when, right now youth are seeing that education is not necessarily the key. And that is becoming a wake-up call, because it doesn't result to you having an opportunity or job. And I think that where the Kenyan people are going to feel the pinch is when they wake up and realize working hard does not equate to me having a better life. And as soon as they see that relation, which they're beginning to see, because people are trying to save more, and even this holiday, ask how many people are going to be traveling home, it is reduced. And so when people begin to realize that the more I work, I'm not seeing the results of my work, that is going to be the wake-up call for many Kenyans. Right now, they still believe in working hard.
Wow. Wanja, final parting shot.
For me, I'll just say, on a light note, I saw Kathy talking about Wanjiko. You know, her name is Wanjiko. So when she's talking about the challenges of Wanjiko, they are personal, you know. She's feeling it as a Wanjiko for real. So that's why I was smiling. You know, speaking of students, really, especially students in universities, those are students that are, I quote unquote, elites in their own villages. And I'm told that the poverty level also among students, because back then they had help, they had a boom. A story is told that in the 80s and in the 90s they were unhappy because they were given chicken wings instead of meatballs. But now the students are fairly hungry. The help is delaying. The new funding model by the government is opaque, not clear. So I'm sure the students are also having very many personal problems. But that said, what is triggering change for the future? I think more women inclusion, and you are part of that change because you have hosted 3 young women in leadership. Because every time young women and women generally have taken leadership, there has been positive change. We saw countries governed by women during COVID and how well they managed COVID. So I think for the future, more women inclusion. I think for the future, political pluralism. For the future, having the way Nerima has said, harnessing the power of the internet and the digital into real action on the ground. But even for the future, really, having a government that truly and genuinely cares for the people, does things and projects that are protecting the people, but also most importantly for us to start asking ourselves, we are as strong as our weakest link. How come we have so many inequalities, and what can we be able to do for the people? Okay. So that is my view for the next 30 years, but really more women leadership. I think we need a woman president so that we can see what the next 30 years will be like and our new political power. Thank you.
You never know what the future holds. Finally, Kathy, you get to wrap it up for us.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for hosting us. And I think my closing remarks will be that all is not lost. We are very resilient people, you know, as a country. And we still there's room for improvement, yes, and a lot needs to happen. But what we need to see is this hope being pendled needs, at least we need to sell genuine hope. And we actually need to come together because we do not have any other country. This is the only country that we have. Work together and support each other and really hope for a better Kenya for ourselves and even for our children and for the generations to come. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Catherine Irungu, political leader, Nerima Wako, CEO, Siasa Place, and Wanja Maina, National Chairperson, Jubilee Party, PWD's League, for this very interesting conversation. I think this conversation should continue and take a look at how the next 30 years will be.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting discussion and one that we should definitely have. Thank you so much for your well-considered opinions on this matter.
Thank you.
Allow me to go through this editorial comment. This week, a man heading home to spend the Christmas break with his family was tragically hit and killed by a car under the control of a drunken motorist along Langata Road. Now, such a needless loss of a husband and a father in such a preventable accident is a heart-wrenching reality that demands immediate attention. Early yesterday morning, another incident involving a passenger bus on the Londiani-Muhoroni Road left 66 people seriously injured and in need of hospitalization. As families gear up for the Christmas break, the influx of vehicles on the roads amplifies the risks of fatal crashes, heightening the need for enhanced vigilance and responsible behavior behind the wheel. It is disheartening that despite continuous efforts to promote road safety, the scourge of drunken driving persists in our society. With festivities underway, the temptation to indulge in alcohol can lead to reckless decisions, endangering countless lives on the roads. Now, according to statistics provided by the National Transport Safety Authority, about 3,600 lives had been lost in road accidents by the end of October this year alone. Addressing this dire situation needs a collective commitment. PSV operators play a pivotal role in ensuring commuter safety by prioritizing it above commercial gains. Overloading, speeding, and other shortcuts for profit must be unequivocally discouraged. The authorities hold a crucial responsibility in enforcing strict motor vehicle inspections and ensuring compliance with the regulations. We dare say the reintroduction of measures like the alcohol blow may be necessary during this period to deter